JP's Teachers.
PR Connections Radio presents. This podcast is brought to you by NVisionU. NVisionU has discovered how to impact spirit, body, and soul with spray technology in just 30 seconds. With NVisionU, you can achieve optimal health and start living the life you have always dreamed of. Use the promo code NVisionU.com/VernDix to take control of your health naturally.
Hello, welcome to JP's Teachers Lounge, Season 1, Episode 6. I have my good friend Erik Francis joining me, returning for the second time. Thank you, Mr. Francis, for returning to JP's Teachers Lounge. How are we doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
And you just got back from John Steinbeck country?
I did. Yes. I was up in beautiful Salinas, California, working with a great school district, Alisal Elementary School District. Worked with a couple of elementary schools up there, elementary teachers, spending a day training on how to teach and learn for depth of knowledge, and spent the Thursday night before and the Friday night after the training in beautiful Monterey. Got to walk on the dock, and I love Northern California.
And you got to see Cannery Row, and
I did. I got to be a lot of stuff there, good stuff in Steinbeck's country.
Yeah. I think I consider him one of my favorite writers of Mice and Men. I thought was really disturbing, but yet powerful. Powerful. Like, two men dreaming of a better life, and things just got in their way. It's obviously a lot more to that, a lot more to it than that. But I wanted to, I know last time we were focusing on your book, but, and we'll go back to your book. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it, or your 4 books that you published. But today I want to get into music and songs that we talked about before, because we talked about this. I want it to be a kind of a fun, but also enlightening, so we can kind of geek out. I geek out on Rush, you geek out on Van Halen, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle.
Right.
we were talking about, in the last or the first 4 episodes that I talked about, one of the main reasons, the main drives or motivations for me creating this podcast was, obviously I want to do my part in helping education, fixing an education. And I think a big part of not just education, but a lot of things when it comes into the political, social realm, is empowerment. Some people don't feel empowered. Some people don't feel like they belong. So, and I remember when I was a struggling kid, in 7th grade, school wasn't really my thing, but I discovered music and songs, and looking at album art and all these things, and I didn't really have a purpose for learning. I don't feel like I really had a purpose for learning. Like, why should I learn this? There wasn't really no interest. Mm-hmm. And again, when I discovered Rush, Moving Pictures, again, there were other albums and other songs before that, but it really connected with me, and I just love the song lyrics. I love the how they created songs, and with a little bit of mystery, a little bit of interpretation. And I started writing poems, and then I realized, now I have a purpose for reading something. I want to read something so that I can create something. And that's the experience I had with songs and song lyrics. What was your first experience with like the I won't say falling in love with music, but just having a passion for music. What was your experience?
Music has been around my family. We weren't musicians or anything like that. Sometimes people will say to you, like, well, my family's a whole family full of musicians, and dad used to play the piano and mom used to. No, we just loved, the radio. We loved entertainment. I remember my childhood, I grew, as you and I are pretty much the same age. We grew up.
You're 29?
I'm sorry. Yep. 29. Birthday coming up. Yeah. Happy birthday. Thank you. All right. Good memory, my brother. All right. Yeah, but growing up in the late 70s, I had older cousins. I had a cousin who really was into rock music, and also disco was very big at that time. And I remember my first albums were Saturday Night Fever, and I remember my first albums were also Grease. But he also introduced me to Kiss. And when we were growing up, Kiss was not even just a rock band. It was basically a marketing tool. That Kiss, everyone loved Kiss. And Kiss Alive, was basically like For Anthem Comes Alive, the album that everybody had. And it was just such an interesting thing. That's when I really got into music when I was a kid, going to see Grease, Saturday Night Fever, Kiss. My cousin introduced me to Black Sabbath. I was 8, 9 years old, and I discovered this band. He said that was up and coming, and I just heard this album called Van Halen 1, and just was a fan ever since. So I think the thing that kind of really made it enamored for me was this guy with long blonde hair who just kept on jumping around screaming, and he did that for a living. But I think really when the 80s happened with MTV, that really introduced and opened our minds and opened our eyes to different forms of music. I think that's really where a lot of my love for music and my love for albums and songs. And it also, I don't know about you, but it also kind of sometimes felt like a competition. Like, did you know who this band was? Do you know who the bassist is? Do you know who the drummer is? And if you didn't know the names of the people in the band, what was wrong with you? You must be an idiot or something. And they make fun of you. What do you mean you don't know who the lead guitarist for Quiet Riot was? And you don't know who the bassist of Def Leppard was. And that I think was more of a big thing. But growing up actually in the 80s, I was really into pop music. I was really into top 40. I listened to.
I think we all were. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. And if you read sometimes the history of music back then, how it evolved. I mean, where you were, the LA scene was huge. They used to call it the skinny tie movement music, where everybody was wearing sport coats and skinny ties and button-up shirts. And it was very much of an alternative post-punk rock kind of scene. That's where you had bands like the Go-Go's coming out, or the Knack and such like that. So I think that's where I pretty much got my love for it. When I was a kid, I just loved music. Billy Joel, I was a huge fan of, because I thought it was great that he was from Long Island and I lived on Long Island, and that he grew up near me in Long Island. And but I think probably in the 80s is when I really got into music and really became an aficionado of it.
There was just so many different sounds, so many different. It was creative. I was gonna talk about this later, but since you mentioned MTV, that's kind of an easy segue for me, because I was going to talk about it anyways. Again, me, of course, my favorite band is Rush, but it wasn't until 1981, and ever since then, that was my favorite band. But again, like you, before that, I was just whoever was on the radio, going to Boston, Kansas, Styx, you know,
REO Speedwagon.
Right, REO Speedwagon. I mean, right. But I remember watching or listening to an interview with Geddy Lee. I think it had to be the early 90s. And someone asked him, you know, what's changed so this is early 90s, like 92, 91, 92, 93. He says, what has changed the most in the music industry? And he said that the impact of MTV. And he said, and you know, I'll be honest, I mean, Rush, even though I love them, their videos were not very good, and you could tell that was not really their repertoire. But
I remember their first video on MTV. Do you? It was the concert footage. I think from Exit Stage Left.
Well, that was good. That was good. I remember when they played Xanadu and Tom Sawyer. Yeah, that was good. But Tom talking about like the studio, the interviews with Distant Early Warning and Big Money. I mean, it just wasn't there. It was. And so he said, what Geddy Lee said was kind of interesting. He goes, it's definitely changed the way you approach a song, you create and produce a song. And he said he was afraid that by making a video out of a song, we were not contributing to it, but taking away from it, like telling everybody this is what the song's about, right, instead of having your own personal interpretation.
Right. You know? And that's just because, have you ever read the books about how MTV came to be?
I read books, but no.
Yeah, it was interesting because here's the thing: music videos was a European thing. It was a British thing. So that's why when we first started watching them, that they were in the books about the history of MTV. They didn't have enough videos to air. That's why a lot of these videos went into heavy rotation, and why a lot of these songs took off. And a lot of the videos came from England because they had top of the charts over there. They had the BBC, and they would air the videos between their shows on the BBC. There's also things that they would talk about. They would say, sometimes when we used to see the videos where they were just like these live concerts, they would literally say, hey, we have a production team. Can we go? You're performing in New York. Could we come down and film in the club? And they would make the video right there. Or they would ask the artist, they would say, do you have any video footage of you from your concerts? Van Halen really did not get into the videos. The first video, I think, that was actually a produced video was their production of Intruder leading into Pretty Woman, Oh Pretty Woman, the remake of it. And a lot of the artists did not want to do the videos. They're like, I don't want to do music videos. I don't want to do this. But then you had also artists who were, oh yeah, I want to do this, that made their careers. And I think a lot of the artists that became classic or became popular at the time, they probably wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for MTV. Like, people don't understand that Billy Idol, MTV made Billy Idol, but Billy Idol was in a punk rock band called Generation X back in the late 70s in England. And we wouldn't have Madonna. We wouldn't have probably Michael Jackson, who to the level that he was, because his videos, they were epics. They were like little movies, and we looked forward to it, like the world premiere of Thriller, or I remember on New Year's Eve that Van Halen's Jump was the premiere video at that time. And do you remember they used to have the little thing on the bottom where, like, MTV exclusive, and they would have the name of the band, the song, the album, the company that produced it, and it was a thing. And I guess now they even closed down MTV. I guess there's not a music video channel anymore through MTV.
Well, I know it has other shows and stuff, but
they used to have a channel. They used to have a channel actually where they still played videos, and I think recently they shut it down. No one was watching.
Yeah, it's funny because I never even thought about like the evolution of it, because some artists welcomed it. They say, hey, it's going to happen. It's here. Might do, it's welcome it or not welcome it, but it's there. Kind of like AI. You could wish it away. It's here. And it's funny because I think one of the best documentaries I've ever watched was the one with the Eagles, the history of the Eagles.
Yeah.
Did you watch that?
I know of it. I haven't seen it yet.
It's really, that's probably my favorite documentary of a band. It was like 3 hours though. It was like 3.5, but it was good. It was really good. And I remember Don Henley saying, I think he was talking about videos, and he goes, I didn't sign up to be an actor.
Right.
I'm a musician. I'm a songwriter. Right. I'm a musician. But it's interesting because, yeah, with that new format, the new media, it created a lot. Again, Madonna, Michael Jackson, they might have just been a footnotes. They might have just ended up maybe just being footnotes of history. But because they embraced it, or just kind of the way things happen. But that's the reality of it. If something's there, a force comes up, and you either have to embrace it or not. And like with crypto, right? Crypto, it's like, well, you can ignore it, but then part of you thinks, well, what if it's for real? I'd like to dabble a little bit in it. I'm not going to put my whole life savings in it, but I'm going to dabble a little bit. So, that's interesting. So what again, as Geddy Lee, as I remember listening to Geddy Lee's interview, I'm trying to kind of trying to link things together. It's almost as like, again, like at least their perspective, at least his perspective, he had mixed feelings about making videos. Like, are we contributing to it, or are we taking away from it? Are we taking away from the personal experience of each person, experiencing the song and thinking about what the song means, or what it means to them? And I kind of hark back to the not just the DOK, the depth of knowledge questions, but just question and answers, period. Like when you try to problem solve and you feel like you find an answer, the thinking stops, right? Because when I'm saying for students, when they get an answer, it's done. It's the answer's done, in terms of like, they arrived at the answer. They don't have to think anymore. Mm-hmm. But when you focus on more questions, like, again, like how, like whatever you're talking about, how did they arrive at this? What if, like those what if questions? What if Atticus was really racist what if his real character was racist and he was just trying to hide it? Just questioning things, because when you question things, the thinking continues. This is the way I feel. Obviously you want to find answers, of course, but I'm talking about like what you do with the depth of knowledge. You create, more questions, the better. Create questions, and try to get students to keep thinking and create questions. But when we focus on the answers, it just seems like, oh, are we doing a disservice to them by just telling them here's the answer, and the thinking stops.
You know what? I'm going to kind of challenge that, because
I'm not saying first of all, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it made me think of a connection of that. And so I'm not saying I agree or like, I'm saying, I'm throwing it out there.
But James, that's school. That's life. I mean, we're living in a time where answers come free. There's more answers out there than ever before. It happened in the 1990s, in the early 1990s, where we became what's called the knowledge age, where knowledge became a commodity. How did we get knowledge before the computer? We trusted our teachers. We trusted the adults. We did not question. It's really funny because everybody thinks that we were such these learners when we were younger. I don't know about that. I think we were compliant. I think we did what we were told. We did what we were taught. And if we did what we were taught and told, we would get an A in achievement and an A in conduct. I don't know if this, and also the demands of society have changed, and it's just also interesting because look, every answer I can get is on a calculator or computer, and it may not be the answer I want. It may not be the answer I need, but it'll give it to me. I'll give you an example. This weekend, I was writing a blog for my publisher about how deaf knowledge is a language, how I've turned it, and I wanted evidence to support what visible thinking was. And I asked the AI to give me quotations from credible authors, and it gave me a quotation and even cited the book and cited the page where the quote was. And I said, wait a minute, I own that book. So I looked and the quote was not in there and on the page. And then I bought the Kindle version of it, and I entered the quote into the Kindle, and it was not there. And so I went to the AI and I said, the quote is not in the book on the page, the specific book you identified on the page you cited. And then the AI said, well, I paraphrased the idea of the book and what the author was saying. And I said, but you presented to me as a quote, and you even cited the book and cited the page number. You paraphrased that. You could have gotten me in some trouble. It apologized to me. I mean, this is the thing that people don't. We're always going to need that element of critical human thinking, the rationale of it. The computers do not have emotions. They don't have ethics. And if we said like logos, pathos, ethos, that's what makes a critical thinker. So it's not, learning is about what does it look like, what does it sound like, and what does it feel like. And the kids these days, look, they don't have to infer, James. It started with our generation because they put the video to the music. And then you see, like, for example, you talk about Rush, you hear distant early warning, and I got to pay attention to those lyrics to talk about what it's about. And then I watch this video where it's about nuclear war, obviously, but if I didn't watch the video, I may have not known that from the song. See, we're living in a very multi-sensory world. And it actually started with our generation when the music started to be put to video. When we were growing up, read the book, don't go see the movie. Actually going to see the movie was actually cheapening the experience. Now it's a part of the experience to basically, there's a standard that says compare multiple formats of how a story's told. So if I'm teaching The Outsiders, or if I'm teaching Romeo and Juliet, or if I'm teaching Of Mice and Men, I can actually show the movie in class. And I can, that used to protect me from showing the movie. Why are you showing Titanic right where the boat hits to the end? Stair number 7, they read A Night to Remember by Walter Lord. So they're comparing a nonfiction text to a fictional depiction of the sinking of the Titanic. And I think we got to get that, understand that we are living in a multi-sensory society. The kids don't read like the way we did. They don't have to read like the way we did, excuse me, like the way we did, or our parents did, or our grandparents did. And we need to figure out how to tap into that. And it's really funny because I just said this to the other day. I had the pleasure and the privilege to teach, because I'm at one of my schools and somebody asked me to teach writing, and I was teaching kids how to start being curious and how to craft their writing. And I said to the kids, I said, if I presented to you To Be or Not to Be, the monologue from Hamlet, and I present to you in print, could you probably tell me what it's about? And they said no. I said, okay, now I'm going to present you the lyrics to All Too Well by Taylor Swift. Oh, they were just all laughing and they were telling me the whole thing, what it's about. So it's that caring. It's that, do I care enough to want to think critically about what I'm reading? Do I care enough to know how I got that answer? Do I care enough to know why that answer is correct? Do I care enough to know? Am I curious enough to know what would happen, what could happen?
Yeah, that's well, it kind of goes back to again they know Taylor Swift, but they don't know Hamlet. So at least they have that prior knowledge, and they bought into that. Like they see the value of that song, and they then they, like you said, they're all over that. So but you're right. I mean, you're right. It's multi-sensory, and we read the book first and then don't watch the movie, or at least read the book first and then watch the movie. Then you'll get disappointed, because when you read the book, you think that you create your own world of what that book's about, and then you watch the movie and then you're disappointed because you see the producer or the movie creator's perspective, or their vision of it. But I agree, though. I mean, it's again, multi-sensory. We got to tap into all of those, but they don't read, like you said, like we used to. We would read the book, then maybe watch the movie, or we would, or there was a lot of other options weren't available. But like you said, there's standards now that say, look at, compare things, compare stories in different multimedia formats. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But the only thing I would say is I want people to read first so that they can make up their own mind, thinking what they think the book's about, then, or the story's about. Then they can go look and listen to other. I think what Geddy Lee was concerned about was when people watch videos, and again, that's just his perspective, that people think that, oh, this is what the video is about. Again, like you said, Distant Early Warning, it's about thermonuclear war. Well, maybe, yeah, well, sure, that's a valid opinion, or maybe it could just be a metaphor for for something else. So right. Yeah, so I mean that's it's interesting because I remember in one of my other episodes, I was analyzing Russia's hemispheres, where it was the abstract battle between Apollo and Dionysus, and Apollo, Apollo would give a plea to the people: follow me, do what I will promise you this, almost like a political debate. Apollo, follow me. And so Apollo was, of course, the god of reason and poetry and science and knowledge, all that stuff. And then Dionysus was more emotion, instincts, desires. And it's funny because now that I look at it, and what you were saying about students, questioning things, again, with our last conversation, I kind of went back to a few things, and I thought, okay, now I can kind of make a connection, at least for me. The people followed Apollo without question. Without question, they followed. Then they created cities, but the desire was not there. They didn't have the desire. So then they went to Dionysus. Oh, I bring emotion, I bring love and passion, and then they did it. But then their intellect was gone. They were dying of cold winter and cold starvation, and the wolves came and then they found Cygnus, the bringer of balance. And what kind of struck me with that was, they followed without questioning. And it's also kind of a kind of an interesting metaphor, because look what's happening in our world now, especially like with politics. It's always on one side or the other, when most of the people are trying to push it back into the middle. And I again, that's a different perspective, that now that even all these years, I'm going back to hemispheres, and I'm trying to think, that's kind of an interesting perspective of them, of looking at it that way. That, again, you said we were kids, we were in school, we didn't question things. We didn't we followed the rules, we got a good grade, we got what we wanted.
We still are living in that society. Look, questioning is uncomfortable and it's not acceptable. All right. I mean, you punish when you question, because people think I'm challenging you, right, or I'm pushing you. You may not know. The best thing anyone can say is, I don't know. And I like to say I don't know all the time. I mean, it's uncomfortable. And a lot of it has to do more with your emotions, to say, oh my gosh, I don't know this. But with questioning, there has to be not just even as a curiosity, but a care to question. And I've been thinking about asking this actually in my presentations, to say, when was the last time you really, really, really wanted or felt like you learned something? Like, when was the last time you really said, boy, this was an opportunity to learn and I love it? I'll give you an example. I was talking with a friend the other week, and she tells me that her brother told me what influenced the assembly line for Henry Ford. And, you get your preconceived notions about where the assembly line came from. We all learned about the Industrial Revolution. And she told me that Henry Ford was inspired by the slaughterhouses in Chicago. And I'm like, what? And sure enough, I looked it up, and it's true, because what would happen is they would put a cow or the meat on a rack, and they would disassemble and make the meats. And Henry Ford said, wait a minute, what if I flipped that and we assembled the car? And that's how the assembly line happened. But do you hear that excitement in my voice, James? Do you hear that like, wow? I mean, the problem is that we look at things at like that, a deeper learning, unfortunately, as who cares, in life. Like, if you have a depth of thinking or a depth of knowledge, you're often like, oh, you're a know-it-all, or you're dismissed as that. But the knowing and the wanting to learn and being able to experiment, being able to say, hey, that didn't work. You talk about problem solving. That's true. Hey, that's not working. Or, hey, let me try this. Yesterday I got thrown into a teaching situation, and they said, can you help my kids learn how to write? And I'm like, geez, give me a little bit of prep time here. So I just kind of, synthesized a bunch of things, and I'm talking to the kids and I'm listening to them. I said, why don't you guys like to write? And they were telling me why I don't like, it's hard to put it all together. So I heard that. And I said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. I want you to write down something you know. Tell me something you know. And they know for certain. And they wrote it down. And I'm going to ask you this now. What do you mean? And they wrote it down. And I said, now I want you to tell me, I'm going to say this to you. Wow, you're right, but why? And they wrote it down. And when they looked at it, they were like, we just wrote a paragraph. And I said, yes, because when you write, that's what you do. What do you know? You write it down. What do you mean? Now I'm explaining it. You're right, but why? Now I'm proving it. So now I get this different class coming in, a little bit different behaviors. And they don't like writing at all. It's not that they're struggling writing. They don't like writing at all. And I said, why do you write? And they said, because I got to get a good grade. And I said, no, you don't. I said, get that off the table. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. You're either going to get a good grade or you don't. Have you ever seen a movie that was horrible? And they go, yes. And I said, you ever heard a song that was horrible? Yes. Okay, somebody wrote that. But they wrote. Okay, why do you write? You write because you care to share what you know. And if you don't care about what you're saying, it won't work. Now, are you confident in what you're saying? And they said, no. And I said, then writing won't work. So I need you to care and I need you to feel confident. This is what I know. And then the teacher said, the kid said, well, how does he know all this? And she said, well, he writes books. And they're like, oh, really? What books you write? And I said, I write education books. I said, but when I write a book, James, I care to share the ideas I have that are featured in that book. I am confident in what I'm sharing. And I will say that teaching and learning with an inquiring mind involves teaching and learning through inquiry and by questioning with good questions. That's what I know. Then I have to say, what do I mean? And now I have to explain it. Then I have to say, I'm right. I know I'm right, but why? Now I have to prove it with evidence. That's how I craft it. If I don't feel it, then it's hard for me to write it. I can't tell you. I mean, I've written 3, working on my 4th, but I really got to feel it to want to write it and to care to share the knowledge. And I seen people who write education books and they're like, yeah, that chapter was in their last book, like verbatim. And it's like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to write like that. And I think that's a big thing, James. We listen to Rush or we listen to these music because it got us curious. What are they talking about? Or we cared, and Rush was something called progressive rock. And those are the bands that made you think. Those are the bands that really made you. It's really funny. People forget that the Beatles started out as poppy, as New Kids on the Block and One Direction, and then made the shift to say, no, we are going to experiment with it, with music. I mean, we wouldn't have Rush. We wouldn't have Pink Floyd. We wouldn't have Yes. We wouldn't have the Moody Blues if the Beatles did not change their sound around 65, 66, 67 and go from She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So but the music, it depends upon the genre. The music was either storytelling, poppy, where things just rhyme, or thoughtful and pensive. And it's really funny, James, because I always say this, that especially when I compare what I do, I like to say the books I write is prog rock. Okay. It is not pop music. And I like to say I'm kind of like Journey. And they go, what do you mean? Because people don't realize Journey started out as a prog rock band. It was the synthesis of Santana's band. I think what is it? The one who sang Hocus Pocus with a Hocus it was a synthesis of bands that came together. And if you listen to the first 4 albums of Journey, it's very jazz rock music. And they said, you got good music, but you don't have the voice and you don't have the poppy tune. Kind of like when they talk about in Queen, when they don't want Bohemian Rhapsody to be the first single, they want I'm in Love with My Car. And And that's the thing that I like to say, that what I do with my writing and my books is that questioning and inquiry, that is Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes. You're not gonna like, scream like pop music listening to Roundabout, or Seen All Good People, or Closer to the Heart by Rush. That you're not going to sit there and be poppy about Tom Sawyer. And I think that was a lot of the struggle about Rush, is that they were always trying to find that single, like they try to do it with Big Money. They try to do it Time Stands Still with Amy Mann. And I think Rush got pushed into that pocket to say, what's that single, like that Tom Petty song, Into the Great Wide Open. The A&R man says, I don't hear a single. And I think that's the thing, is that basically we have to care and be curious to listen. And we need to listen to what things are saying. I mean, there's some good music out there, and there's some thoughtful, pensive music. And the kids are learning. I mean, I remember when kids used to tell me how stupid Kanye was because he said 300 like the Romans and the 300 were the Greeks. So it's what are we doing to get the kids to take a moment to listen and care? I mean, I said something to the other day. I was with these kids, and I said, hey guys, before there was Taylor Swift, there was Stevie Nicks. And they're like, who? Or then someone, oh yeah, my mom likes her. And I said, yeah, just listen to Stevie Nicks, or go listen to Sheryl Crow. Or, I used to say to my daughters who love, the singers, I go like this, I go listen to Ann Wilson. Go listen to Pat Benatar. Go listen to Linda Ronstadt.
Chrissy Hines.
Chrissy Hines, yeah. But these great singers, these melodic, beautiful singers, and the songs that they sang. And they didn't sing, a lot of them were not profound. We had their their little jingly tunes and everything. But it's like, listen, like they always say, listen to the music, man. Listen to the music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, there's pop music, and then there's prog rocks, and you mentioned that your writing is prog rock, but prog rock is timeless. It stays. Pop is big, and then something else comes along. So I think that's probably more important to me. Is making it timeless. It's going to last.
It's the mass marketing, and it's because it's called music business. It's called film business. It's called show business.
Right.
Think about when we were growing up and we were teenagers. The big bands were everyone who had hair that was so much hairspray in it, it killed the ozone layer. They wore leather pants. They screamed high-pitched screams. And the basic central message is, don't need nothing but a good time. All of a sudden, this band comes out of Seattle, and they're singing reworked Sonic Youth songs, pretty much. That's who really influenced Nirvana. And then we went from Don't Need Nothing But a Good Time to I'm Still Alive. And it's really funny, James, because if you think about it, that's just kind of like the way things go from a show business kind of thing, is that all the heavy metal bands from that era, they all washed the gunk out of their hair. They cut their hair to their shoulders. They let it be greasy. They traded in their leather pants for baggy jeans. They went from high-pitched screams to low-pitched growls. And they went from, singing about partying to taking substances to avoid the pain. And what happened was that it became popular music. I mean, to think about the fact that the Chili Peppers was popular music, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the word alternative, you can't even call it alternative because alternative became pop. And then what happened was that from that, you then had the rise of the R&B and the rap music, because that catered to a certain kind of a certain population, and that started getting more attention on MTV. Do you remember a time when they wouldn't play rap music on MTV?
Yeah.
And they relegated to like an hour show called Yo MTV Raps.
Yeah.
And then it went
The
full.
Headbangers Ball.
Yeah, Headbangers Ball was for the heavy metal, but everything was rock. Everything was, pop and rock and rap music. No, we'll just give you an hour. Okay. Yo MTV Raps with what was his name? I see the guy with the hair with the bleach blonde in it and the other heavyset dude. And then that became popular. And then it backlashed again, where all of a sudden you have these girls from England going, "If you want to be my lover." And they took all the Mickey Mouse cast members and turned them into pop stars. I mean, it just gets, it's the business runs it, and the business runs the trends. What I like to say is the band that survived all that transition in the 90s and came back bigger than ever, out of all the bands that survived that never, ever, ever forgot who they were, was Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi waited it out. Bon Jovi, when John Bon Jovi cut his hair, remember, for the Keep the Faith album, and all of a sudden they're like, what's going on here? And the songs got a little darker, but I think that's the smart thing, and I think that's what makes him like a smart creative type, was that he said, I'm going to wait this out, and I'm going to wait for my time to come back. And in 2001, he came back bigger than ever. And now, would you ever have thought that Bon Jovi would have survived the hairband? And in fact, they don't even want to be called that. I mean, if you ever talk to Joe Elliott from Def Leppard, you ever hear Joe Elliott from Def Leppard talking, he goes, we were not a hairband. I'm like, dude, you were the epitome of a hairband. Okay. You had the most amazing mullet before Billy Ray Cyrus came along. You were the epitome of a hairband. You were a epitome of that 80s debauchery. And if you look at the bands that still lasted, that we're still listening to today, you got to ask yourself, with this modern music, are these kids still going to be 50 years old going to see, I don't know who, Tyler the Creator in concert or things like that?
Well, you never know, because like going back to the movie Almost Famous, which is kind of funny that they put this in. It was Jimmy Fallon who played that role of the executive producer from the network, and he said, you guys got to strike while the iron's hot. If you think Mick Jagger will be up there in his 50s, you are sadly mistaken. And they put that in, and sure enough, I mean, Mick Jagger he's still performing. I mean, he's in his 80s, 85. Mm-hmm. It's funny that I love when they do stuff like that. They put it in there on purpose, because back then you didn't know. Back they had bands who were, I mean, they didn't think they would still be around much. Some probably didn't think they would still be alive with all the drugs that would take, but they didn't. A lot of them didn't think they would survive. But again, that's for the here and now. It's who knows in 20, 30 years. Some artists, the new artists, definitely won't make it, but some will. You never know. I mean,
if it mirrors education, I mean, here's the thing: education follows trends,
mm-hmm.
and you have these people who are trendy in education. They're like the pop music in education, and people will follow trends. I'll give you a personal example. When I started doing what I was doing, it was the rise of the practitioner. Because what happened was that in the 2000s, all the education books that came out were all the professors. These were like the doctors, the education professors who worked at universities. They wrote in journals. And then all of a sudden, the big publishing companies came to them and said, hey, do you want to write a book? And they became this entity. I like to call them the classic rockers of education. These are the people like Bob Marzano. He's like the Beatles of education. Or, Wiggins and McTighe. They're like the Simon. They're like well, I don't want to say Simon and Garfunkel because they never got along, but more like, they were more like the Mick and Keith of education. The Rolling Stones, Carol Ann Tomlinson, Charlotte Danielson, all these names. And they were all these professors that the publishing companies came in and said, do you want to make a book? Now, when I started, I was a classroom practitioner. I was not a professor. I didn't talk in theory, which a lot of these guys did. And they talked about how you make theory, and they talked a little bit about practice, but they were still professors. I was in that group that we were the practitioners. Hey, this is what we did in our classes to get these kids engaged and educated. And here's some techniques we did. So we would take the music of the masters, like you say, and then we kind of play it. So the practitioners were the arena rockers of the time. So they were like the Journeys, the Styxes, the Bostons, the Totos, so you had those people. Then around 2014, 15, people started going out and making their own little publishing companies, not the big corporates, but the little. So they were like, basically, you would call them like the indie rockers. They were like the REMs. They were like the garage banders. Sorry, more like the indie rockers. Excuse me. The garage banders became these people who went on Twitter and got a whole following. It's called the PLN network. But also around this time, you had these people who came up and they had a good shtick and they had a gimmick and they had a thing, and they might dress up or they might give you these words of quote wisdom that are just kind of rhetoric, but it's like, like you see something that says live, laugh, love, and you think you have the meaning of life. And they rose up through Twitter, and I compared them to like the garage banders, or like the people who would basically just, release their tapes and put it out there. Some of them don't even have a book, and they had a following. And a lot of them also became pop stars, and they are pop stars. They come up there. It's not deep. You're going to get entertained. There's a lot of spectacle, and they're going to do the same show they do every time. What's happening now is that you got people who are called, I like to call them cover banders and tribute banders. So the tribute banders are the people who read your book and say, I'm going to go present on Erik's work, and they'll cite my work. This is based on Erik Francis. Hey, and I know a lot of people are doing it out there where they're like, hey, I read Erik's DOK book, and now I can train on it. But then also you got what I call the cover banders, not the tribute banders, because the tribute band says, we are hemispheres and we play the music of Rush. Okay. The cover banders are the ones who go, I am Geddy Lee. And they're just taking it and doing it. And they give you no credit. So when people used to say to me, then who was I used to say, I'm like an 80s heavy metal band. I can rock with the best. I'm influenced by the masters, but time's going to tell if I'm Bon Jovi or Slaughter. And they go, who's Slaughter? I go, right, just another band from the 80s that got named after the lead singer because he had a cool last name. Now I see myself more as prog rock, because a lot of stuff that I do is very cerebral. And it's like questioning is my closer to the heart. It is my Honor of a Lonely Heart. It is my Another Brick in the Wall. It is side one of Journey Frontiers, because that's where all the album or the pop hits are. But DOK is like the side B. It's the deep cut. It's the AOR. So you really got to be into Journey to listen to the second side of Frontiers. So when we talk about things like this, and we talk about trends, and we talk about it, and this is the thing right now, and this is the problem I see also with AI and also technology with it, is that AI will simplify things for us, and they'll make it easy, but we're still going to have to think deeply. I mean, Taylor Swift is a pop singer, but she lasts because her songs are profound. And because when you listen to her songs, the kids are like, who's she talking about? Beyonce lasts because Beyonce, not only are her songs profound, but she also changes up her thing. I mean, this whole Cowboy Carter thing. So those are the people that last. And that's the whole thing. We need to have the kids think. And we need to have the kids to care about it and care about what they're thinking.
It reminds it. No, I get it. I mean, you're going to have to give me a diagram or where you are. You're at, but it reminds one of the things we got to wrap up here. But
yeah,
another great. I mean, I really enjoyed it. But what I enjoy is going on YouTube and watching young people react to videos, especially like Rush and Yes and all these bands. And I remember one person, I forget what show it was. I think he said it best. He goes, he says, fans come for the hits, but they stay for the deep cuts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's brilliant. But yeah, we haven't even touched the surface, but I like your analogies about prog rock and everything. That does make sense. I think, but they complement one another. You know, you can have side A or the singles, but then you need the deep cuts too.
But that's also a problem with this. So and if I can say so boldly, for education, we want our kids to think like it's prog rock, but we want training like it's pop music.
Yeah,
you know, and that is something we can go into, because you know, and that's the thing, and that's the hard part, you know, with teachers now, because look, professional development for teachers has not been effective, and it's the system's fault. It's our own fault. I mean, do we teach these kids to say, okay, I'm going to train you, I'm going to teach you this topic that you're going to learn at the end of the day after going through 6 periods, and we expect you after an hour to be with us that you should be masters of this. You should demonstrate mastery.
Yeah, and we got next we'll do that for next time. Maybe next time we'll delve deep into that. But we need to wrap up. So thank you once again, Mr. Erik Francis. And this is JP's Teachers Lounge, Season 1, Episode 6. I hope you guys enjoyed this or our deep dive, and have a great night. Thank you, everyone.
Did you know your clothing could help balance your body's pH levels? Our cutting-edge fabric technology naturally promotes optimal pH balance, helping you feel energized, refreshed, and at your best every day. Use promo code PRTalk for more info. Tap the link in the description or contact our experts at 702-445-9488 to learn more.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.